Welcome to the Edge Dwellers Cafe, an interview-based podcast featuring conversations at the convergence of politics, environment and mental health in a world on edge. My name is Ben Habib and I'm an international relations scholar, an environmentalist, permaculture practitioner and neurodivergent coffee drinker. Join me in my quest to explore the edges that define us, divide us, and shape how we interact with each other as we grapple with the extraordinary changes taking place across our world. Order a hot beverage and get comfortable. This is the Edge Dwellers Cafe. Greetings, Edge Dwellers. Part of my core mission for the Edge Dwellers Cafe is to provide a platform for important discussions around mental health and neurodiversity, and to amplify voices from within neurodivergent communities. In this episode, I'm excited to welcome my friend and colleague Claire Kearns to the Edge Dwellers Cafe. Claire is a staunch neurodiversity advocate. She's a writer and social media content creator who's published across multiple genres on platforms through magazines, newspapers, university press and student publications. Claire and I developed our professional relationship through our studies in the International Relations program at Trobe University, at both undergraduate and then master's levels. When I first started teaching Claire, neither of us were aware that we were neurodivergent. So the evolution of our relationship is entwined with our respective emerging awareness of our neurodiverse reality. While we've come from different places and have had very different experiences, this discussion is the culmination of our common bond in the neurodiversity movement. Earlier this year, Claire won the Trobe University Excellence Academy Inaugural Art Competition for a poem about her experiences as a neurodiverse student at university. In our discussion, we talk about the poem and its inspiration. We also discuss inclusive practice for disability and neurodiversity, token representation in university management processes, learning and accessibility during COVID lockdowns, growing up with undiagnosed neurodivergence, surviving domestic violence and the ongoing impacts of trauma, and finding common ground across political divides. Given the content matter, our discussion does cover topics that will be sensitive to some listeners. See the chapter list in the show notes for when in the podcast we touch on the more sensitive topics. Before Claire and I get chatting, a quick call to action. You can support the podcast by clicking the like or subscribe buttons on whatever platform you're listening on. Leave a review too if you're feeling suitably inspired. You can also help support the production of the podcast by making a one-off monetary contribution of any amount via the PayPal link on the website. See the show notes for details. But now it's time for my conversation with Claire Kearns.
The Edge Dwellers Cafe.
Claire Kearns, welcome to the Edge Dwellers Cafe.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
What does it mean to you to be an edge dweller?
So my life has been lived in two parts, like before returning to higher education and after. So I would say that the journey that I am on is like probably tied to the meaning of edge dweller for me.
In the context of our discussion, I think it's a good lead-in one. In other interviews, I've just asked it at the end, but for this one, I think it's a good starting point. So the next thing I wanted to ask was about the sensory cognitive experience of recording today, of doing this discussion.
So it's a little bit weird, right? Because my entire world was like this. I spent my honours year on a speakerphone on a mobile phone, right? Shuffled around tables and forgotten about half the time. Halfway through my honours year, they just stopped ringing me. I was supposed to be on Zoom, but they didn't know how it functioned. My then supervisor was supposed to contact me on Zoom and, didn't contact me. So suddenly I'm thrust into a world which is 10 times more accessible to me because I can have conversations and participate in stuff like this, which is why I probably badgered you about, like, let's do this. So, yeah, I'm taking every opportunity I'm well enough to take whilst this lasts, because I know that as soon as it goes back to, like, COVID normal, it's all going to go away for me. Doing what I can while I can.
That's a really important point. With the Zoom era, this has opened doors to participation that weren't there previously. What's the difference in the sensory or cognitive experience of having a discussion or participating in a class through Zoom, through this online format, versus actually being in the room? What's the difference for you?
Being a part of stuff is, like, huge. Like, getting to know people, like, even though it's only virtually at the moment, it's really massive for me. I'm no longer isolated. And I think one of the biggest things in COVID that was difficult for me has been I'm suddenly thrust into a situation where I don't have, like, my lawn bowls team. I don't have all the extra little outings. Like, I like to hike a lot, stuff that I can't do. My world, I always thought it was pretty small little bubble, but it's even more. And it's reminded me of my childhood quite a lot, where it was just myself. And I didn't speak for most of my childhood. So now suddenly being put back into that, it's like a grief kind of process or an awareness kind of process of going, and the panic hasn't been good, because it's like, oh my God, I don't want to go back. It's felt like regressing in a way. So, like, there's positives and then there's negatives. I'd say the positive of this sensory environment has been I can do more or be included more, which is actually, like, really, really big. It's one thing that's actually kind of kept me sane or saner, but that the environment in itself, it's so artificial. So, yeah.
One of my personal reasons for doing this podcast is to get better at having one-on-one discussions like this and to be able to talk off the cuff a little bit more, because I find that really difficult with my short-term memory recall and social awkwardness. And so I want to challenge myself and put myself in a position where I can try and get better at that and be in an environment where I can have one-on-one discussions, which is more comfortable for me rather than being in a really crowded social setting, which is more overwhelming.
I get that, because to me, you don't seem socially awkward. You seem like smarter, more organised, like you've got a job, like you've got, like, it all going on. So we make assumptions about other people. So to me, you don't seem socially awkward, because, like, look at your podcast. You've already interviewed, like, 6 or 7 people. So you must know 6 or 7 people. And for me to talk to 6 or 7 people might take me a while. I think that we think, like, in our brains, we think that other people judge or whatever us or perceive us in a certain way. But I don't think that other people do. I think it harks back a lot to me for high school, particularly. When I was very young, I come from an academic family. I was always last, but I was sort of seen as a bit of a late bloomer rather than, there being something deficient. But by the time I got to high school, I was socially ostracised because I couldn't thrive in that environment. So I'd gone from a smallish primary school to a very large high school, and, like, the 90s were pretty brutal. Anyway, it wasn't like today where many assemblies and wellbeing sessions on why you can't bully people, but social awkwardness, it's something that once you think that you are because of high school, no matter how far you come, you don't really perceive yourself that way. Like with this poem that we were talking about earlier, someone said to me, they shared it on their page and they went, oh, it's the fabulous Claire Kearns. And I'm thinking, fabulous? Me? Like, I've done nothing for a year. I'm letting everybody down, the whole team. And somebody thinks I'm fabulous? You know, like it actually wasn't you. It was one of the female staff members. But yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, that stuff from childhood and from when you're a teenager, they're patterns that are extraordinarily hard to break, aren't they? Of how you see yourself and value yourself. There's nothing wrong with us, but that imprint from how other people react to us and treat us is very hard to get out of. And, you know, I'm still grappling with that. A lot of our peers in the community are grappling with that too.
So when I first started back at La Trobe, I did not realise that I even had a disability, because I had just been, like, I went to regular schools and I had a regular career. And from a high achieving family, I think that, or maybe it was the era, I don't know. My son went to a paediatrician more times in the first month that he was alive than I ever went to. Well, I never saw one. So I don't know whether there were just less paediatricians or, you know, it was a BMX era. Like, dust yourself off, you know, you'll be right. Like, you probably only saw doctors when something was broken. I think I was just seen as weird, horrible, antisocial. I think when I was a teenager that there was some sort of like substance abuse or something like that was going on, but it was like very vague as to what was wrong with me. So I thought there was always something wrong with me. And I sort of lived that inbuilt narrative, which led me in a way to actually end up in a domestic violence situation, because I didn't have a lot of self-esteem. I still don't, but there's a lot more. There was a hell of a lot more. I had this incident where I bumped into a guy who used to bully me, right? And when I say I was bullied, I was like massively, like the most bullied girl in high school. And this guy gets out of his Woolworths delivering truck and goes, "Claire Kearns," like we're some old friend. And it was a very awkward situation. Fortunately, because of COVID restrictions, couldn't talk long as he made his delivery. But afterwards, I took away, and not that there's anything wrong with being a delivery driver, but I thought to myself, so I learnt in a few minutes that this guy never married, never had kids, never did anything after year 9, lives at his brother-in-law's in like a caravan out the back. And this guy that had all this power over me in my brain for all that time, he's actually not like that powerful. Like, fortunately, I bumped into someone that broke the curse a bit.
Yeah, and that's a clue, isn't it? Like, the people that bully us, often they're externalising their own insecurities and pains and traumas that really have nothing to do with us. And coming to terms with that truth, as well as our own truth, is part of this journey.
Well, did you see that there was like that 50th anniversary of the Hey Hey Saturday thing yesterday? I personally didn't watch it. I find that show extremely offensive. But it was on TV every weekend, unless we were going to church on Saturday night. That mentality is what we grew up with. So how are people going to treat people that are neurodiverse well if Australian society at the time was just a lot different than it is now, thank God. But like...
Did you see earlier in the year, Kamal came out and made a statement about how he was treated on Hey Hey at Saturday and all of the overt racism that he put up with through that time?
I love Kamal. The thing that made me really, really uncomfortable, even as a kid, was how Molly Meldrum was put up. Like, some of the things like John Blackman said, like, it was just brutal. But like, I think that definitely that era, that informed the people that I went to high school with. I mean, it's not right, but it's now made me kind of understand it a bit better. It's also possibly why I asked you about today, because I've been thinking a lot to myself that if you don't stick your head up above the parapet from time to time and do stuff like this, then the society that, like, you know, my son or other people's kids, it's going to be the same.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, as it turns out, I think we grew up not far away from each other. You were in
Oh,
West
really?
I was in Mount Gambier.
Oh, really? Dunkeld. So
Dunkeld, yeah.
a lot of the time. So my grandparents lived in Dunkeld and all my family and like our family farms and stuff, like between Dunkeld and Glen Thompson. But I also grew up in Gippsland. Yeah. Wow. That's actually really close.
Yeah. The kind of culture that you're talking about, particularly through the 90s when we're coming up, is very relatable. I think that's why you and I get along, because we're coming from a similar place.
We are and we aren't. And that's weird and interesting in itself.
So when we corresponded about doing this interview, you sent me a couple of things that you'd like to talk about. And one of the things you said related to our professional relationship as two neurodiverse people.
Yeah.
And two neurodiverse people who were not out when we met and when we started working together, and who've both been coming to terms with where we're at in our different ways through this journey, and then being able to connect on that level as well, which has been really awesome for both of us, I think.
Sorry.
How have you interpreted the evolution of our professional relationship and what that's meant for you, as a neurodiverse student coming through the university?
I left uni round about the turn of the millennium, and then I was away from uni for about 15 years. And I got to a point where I come from like a domestic violence background, like a pretty severe domestic violence background. And I got to a point where I realised I was going to be dead or dead inside if I didn't make a change. So I direct applied to La Trobe and decided if I die, I die by reaching out and getting an education, because I'm probably going to die anyway, which is a terrible place to start your educational journey, but it's where I started mine. So I enrolled in a BA and I was trudging through that, and it was pretty horrific at times, and I wasn't getting a lot out of it depending on the subject, but I was just getting it done, whittling away like one subject at a time. And how we first crossed paths is you were an elective. Oh, it's online. I can do that. So, yeah, I wasn't expecting a lot. I was expecting potentially to fail because it wasn't from my disciplines at all. And I'd never taken any kind of politics or similar. So I was sort of keeping an eye on the census date thinking, oh, yeah, well, we'll see how we go. But it worked out much differently than I thought it would. So I can still remember the first time I met you. Coming from a domestic violence background is like, it's really full on. And like, I remember the first time I met you, I was incredibly nervous because I could not be in a room alone with a male person at that point. None of my friends were male that were under the age of about 70. Like, one reason I go lawn bowling is because I'm hanging out with people that aren't a threat to me. So I think for me, the fact that we managed to develop a working relationship and that you're a guy says a lot. Like, to me, I just perceived everybody that was male at that point as a potential threat, purposely didn't dress up, purposely didn't wear makeup, purposely didn't try to draw attention to myself in any way whatsoever. I think I was very lucky too, like that happened, because I'm incredibly timid, right, because of all of those experiences. And I think that being that timid, if I'd had a different teacher at that point that wasn't neurodiverse, I think that they wouldn't have had that empathy to kind of go, there's something slightly bigger going on here. And if I'd failed at uni or been thrown out, I would probably be dead by now. Like, I've managed to forge a life for myself that's, I've done incredible things. I've gone through Victims of Crime Tribunal and stood up and told my story. And well, to me, that's incredible. But like I've done things, me and my son have a totally different life that just wasn't imaginable to me 5 years ago. I get interviewed every 4 years or so because I'm a former ward of the state, like graduate outcomes for care leavers, because there's only something very, very small amount of us actually get a uni degree. In 2016, I was interviewed and I was a totally different person than I am now. And I was interviewed a couple of weeks ago and they've still got that interview and were talking to me like, you've gone from there to there. Like, what the hell's happened to you? Yeah, it's been a weird journey.
Just to backtrack, how would you describe your neurodiversity? Because obviously every neurodiverse person is different. Everyone's neurology is slightly different and expresses in different ways. How would you describe yours?
I know some people don't like this phrase because, you know, that there's a big, broad spectrum of people that are neurodiverse, and some people it's really a hindrance to. But for me, in many ways, it is like a superpower. It's also at times the most exasperating thing under the sun. So I spent 6 weeks earlier this year where I basically did nothing but move from my bed to my couch to having a panic attack to, like, I was nauseous for 6 weeks, like unable to eat properly for 6 weeks. Like, my biggest achievement for those 6 weeks was basically I managed to like shower and get dressed and continue looking after my child. So it can be the best thing and it can be the worst thing. But how do I describe it? I think I'm just beginning to find words to describe it now that aren't negative and wound up in negativity.
Yeah, and in talking about that 6-week period, I think neurotypical people don't understand the extraordinary level of resilience and power that it takes to sustain yourself through a period like that. There's actually great power in being able to get through that.
Well, I'd just come out of having the flu, and I've never had ordinary flu. I was so sick, $100 note could have blown past me and I wouldn't have tried to stop it. You know, it would have been thousands and I couldn't have moved. And so I was at my weakest, and then this came back. And I think one of the exasperating things is sometimes I seem to take 2 steps forward and then 5 steps back, and then eventually I get a surge of energy and I'm able to do something or other again. And then I take 5 steps back. But all the time there's this voice that's going on inside my head. Like today, I've done 98% of an assignment, but the topic sentences of each paragraph, they don't link. You know how it's supposed to be like a mini thesis in between? Yeah, it ain't coherent. So, like, I feel sorry for the person marking it. Not that it's a great effort, but it's an effort, you know. And I had to send an email and basically say, so look, this is like what's going on. I've got this 98% finished assignment. I know that it's due in 2 days and that's plenty of time to write 400 words, but I don't know if my brain can cope with that. And you don't know what response you're going to get to those emails, like, ever. I mean, I'm starting to feel a little bit more comfortable that I'm going to get a better response. It's mind-blowing shifting disciplines, because I'm now in a position where almost all the time the staff are writing back things where it's not like, well, tough shit, you know when it's due. Like, but at the same time, there's this horrible situation where you go, I'm letting the entire team down. Like, they've been more than reasonable. They've been more than polite, nice. Like, get it together. Like, what are you doing this for? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the conversation we've had on several occasions, isn't it? Just you feeling in that space and me trying to reassure you that it's okay, we've got your back. And when your experience hasn't always been that, then I understand the hesitation.
I've also noticed, like, other staff members in our discipline that contacted me, like I'd contacted them, but we were conversing, and they actually said, I now kind of have a better understanding of your world. And I went, oh, okay. But like COVID has brought a level of like, but there's been other parts of it where, I don't know if you found this, Ben, but like I have had to avoid social media a lot, like especially Facebook. People complaining and whining and the politics and the divisiveness and just over the stupidest things. It's all too much to process for me.
Yeah, it's an overwhelming moment, isn't it? COVID and the lockdowns, the restrictions, the discussions over vaccines, social distancing, the whole nine, the precarity, the loneliness, all of these things swirling together, they're impacting on people in different ways, but it's turned politics on its head and it's unanchored people.
Yeah.
And you can really see that in the divisiveness at the moment and the anger.
Yes. And that anger, like I watched one friend who I've known since I was 11, and they've always been socialist kind of leaning, and they've basically got sucked into this, and I've watched them go into the alt-right with horror, like some of the stuff that they're sharing, and I've gone, do I unfriend him? Like, where do I go to from here? And at first I actually thought it was a mental health like issue, that he was experiencing a breakdown. And then I realised what was going on, and witnessing that was one of the worst things that I've ever seen. So fortunately for me, I went the opposite direction, I think. Like I was saying before, I'd come from like a domestic violence situation. So none of my opinions were my own, none. Like how I voted, where I went to church, that I even went to church, like everything that I thought wasn't my thoughts. I didn't have my own thoughts or opinions or freedoms or anything else. I used to think it was normal to get like 20, 25 phone calls a day to like monitor where I was and what I was doing. So it's been like pretty epic changing from that. Like, and to giving yourself permission to actually think differently or think for yourself. And I now realise that for most of my adult life, I just didn't really have to think for myself. I didn't even know what I thought, because I'd never really examined it. So I think part of the reason why I've been so slow at producing work has been, I don't even know what my argument is. Like I've been told many times my argument in work is like reasonably needs developing. And it's like, well, I don't know what I think. And it's a little bit intimidating that most of the staff are probably around my age group. So it's like, why hasn't this fully formed person that's an adult like started to like think about this stuff a little bit earlier than now?
I understand that. Being able to find your own voice is part of this journey. I've had to do it. And it's really hard when you've taken shit earlier in your life. The instinct is to keep your head down and stay out of the way and stay out of trouble. To be able to find your voice and stick your head over the parapet, as you said, that's a huge act. It takes extraordinary courage and extraordinary power to do that.
But it's still panic-inducing. Like you've seen me when I've actually done well at stuff and imploded at my own success, which is not a fun moment. But
with me, I'll go and do a class. There's things you don't see and other people don't see the private side of me coping with having my head over the parapet and being a semi-public figure. If I go to a public event, if I do a presentation, or even if I just teach some classes and lectures, after that, I'm absolutely physically and emotionally wrecked. And I need downtime, alone time to recharge.
The thing about COVID that stuffed me. You don't get that. Sorry. continue?
No, go on. Follow that thought. That's interesting.
Oh, that's what killed me. That's what led to me 6 weeks of because I'm now, normally I used to have space, some time alone to listen to my loud music or do my own thing and just wipe everything out. And now I don't have that. I'm never alone, 24/7. So that's pretty panic-inducing right there.
Yeah, and neurodivergent people need that, don't we? We need that space to be able to recharge because let's face it, we're living all the time in a hostile sensory and social environment. That space is integral to our health and well-being to be able to recharge. And if you don't have it, you can't keep burning the candle at both ends without that recharge time and not crash at some point, not shut down.
I think my body just went, right, okay, it's now rest time, whether you like it or not. So I've had to, in that period of time, start seeing the therapist that the court awarded me when I became a victim of crime. I've not seen them in ages because I was essentially deemed healed, and coping quite well and doing well. And so to have to contact them was a bit of a pain in the butt. But to also need to, God, it made me angry. But then I've realised every day just about I'm having a nap or I'm having a shower at lunchtime, but I'm getting through this. Somehow, slowly, I'm getting through this. And other people are finding it tough. I don't know about you, Ben, but I reckon neurotypical people may actually be finding this more difficult than we are, just based on things I'm seeing on social media about people complaining about seemingly petty crap. Maybe it's actually harder for them than us. I don't know.
I suspect that might be true. For us, being alone, being isolated a bit more, that's part of our everyday existence. And that, we need that as well. As I said, we need that space. But if you get your energy and recharge from being social and being around other people and you don't have that, I get it. It would have the same kind of detrimental impact on your well-being as putting us in a really hostile sensory environment.
I've gone through a few graduations at Trobe now, and every time I've had to be walked across the stage by my support person, and that whole environment is just not okay for me. So, you don't realise until all this pause of life has made me kind of realise, wow, it really is a hostile environment. Wow, it really could use some improving.
Edge Dwellers Cafe.
We've got a neurodiverse mentor and a neurodiverse mentee. There's no guidebook. There's no real support. There's no information or anything else. And the onus is kind of on me, but kind of on you as well. But I think that a whole big bunch of equity stuff is the onus is on the person, which is person-centered or person-orientated, which, we're supposed to contact the staff if our LAP, needs to be sent or whatever. If you're the sort of person that suffers from anxiety or panic, or you've never put words to things, most of my friends, my closest friends, and I'm blessed with quite a number of them, they don't even know that there's anything different about me. One of them said to me not that long ago, oh, you seem to overanalyze everything from every different angle and think about it, but we just go, oh, that's just Claire. And I was a little bit offended, but I suppose that's a nice way of looking at it too, to just be just Claire. So I don't really publicly out myself, not because of, I guess it's fear as well. And also once you're out, you're out. You can't put that genie back in the bottle. I think also it's I'm an intrinsically private person that likes to spend chunks of time alone and processing and listening to my music or whatever I'm doing. Having to tell people it's infuriating. It's like you have to approach someone, like I did, just saying, look, I think my essay is going to be late or crap or both. Like, to have to do that is just so difficult. But I do understand that it's probably necessary. Otherwise, no essay would ever be due anytime for anybody. What would come out of this, I suppose, would be that a set of like guidelines or responsibilities. I mean, there's three people that are in this like relationship. There's not just like you and me, like staff and student, but like there's the university too. And I'm paying them a buttload of money over the course of my lifetime to be there. Whilst they don't like guidebooks, it would be kind of nice if some of the onus was shifted a little bit. You know, that they had some kind of checkpoints that actually said, hey, staff member, are you doing all right dealing with all of this stuff? I think that they should go, hey, student, how you doing? You know, is everything working for you? Could we be of assistance? Do you need us to talk to the teacher? Because you can't at the moment because you're on the ground, like feeling sick.
But yeah, you're right about the 3 points of contact. Like there's you, there's me, but then there's the university. And, you know, you're paying the university and expect support in return.
Yeah.
What I can provide is also shaped by the constraints of the university and the resources available as well. And so it's an enormous mediating factor in the relationship.
I think overall, like, because I'm on a crap load of like places where I represent Team Neurodiversity, but I'm on every available like that. They always come to me and ask, oh, do you want to be on this forum or that forum or whatever? They want to help. They're so positive and want to help. They don't want people like me to have this experience. But I think COVID's the closest many of them have got to any kind of understanding whatsoever. And I still don't think that they do. It's just tone deaf a lot of the time. And it's not meaning to be, but people are very eager to help. They'd love to help, but there's some sort of blockage between that desire and true understanding that enacts change. And I hope that in the next few years, like, that is resolved, because I think it will mean a lot for staff and students alike.
Well, the people that work across the institution are generally good people.
Yes.
At a human level, the human empathy and connection is there.
Yeah.
But in their roles, when you work in a large institution, and it happens to me too, you're not the person anymore, you're the institutional creature. You function by a different set of rules that are sometimes inherently dehumanizing to you and the people that you have to deal with as well. And getting through that is the real hard part. Yeah.
And I don't know that we can ever adequately explain, like, that every single thing affects us. So, like, the week that there was cuts to the uni. Okay, well, I can't function this week. I've actually wondered before, and this might sound a little ridiculous, there needs to be some kind of team that actually, you know how like on the press conferences for COVID, and there's like someone who is in the corner and they're doing Auslan? I have wondered whether we need like somebody who like breaks news to us, institutional changes, restructuring, whatever, like in a more us-friendly environment.
That would benefit everyone. I think not just us. But I don't think large institutions are capable of that level of care.
No.
Because they're just not designed that way. That's not how they work.
Well, I see myself as a paying customer, right? And customers have rights. So I know it's a big institution, but I hold out hope.
You've got lots more leverage than the people that work in it as the paying customer, which is really sad, but unfortunately that's how it is.
I think, though, also in reality, I'm probably only of about 400 out of 40,000 paying customers that are currently there. So my buying power, as it were, isn't all that high, which is what it is.
So, Claire, you recently won the La Trobe University Excellence Academy Inaugural Art Competition for a poem you wrote entitled I Was. Now, I thought this was a fantastic poem. I shared it all around social media and it got a great reaction among people who commented on the share. What is it that you were saying about your various experiences at university through this poem? Because it was a really powerful piece and it probably speaks to some of the things you've already just talked about. But do you want to expand on that?
The last 12 months haven't been that fab and I haven't produced that much work. But one day I came across a post that was asking for entrance and that what does inclusion mean to you was the theme. And I was so angry in that moment based upon what we were just talking about, like about some of the limitations and the impact on health and well-being and family life and everything, that I kind of rage typed for about an hour. And my intention was not to win or even get an honourable mention. It was literally so that somebody would open it up and go, maybe this was tone deaf. And then I didn't realise that it was actually judged by people that outside of our community, that was actually a couple of like sculptors or curators or whatever, experts in that field. So maybe that had something to do with it. But yeah, that was really awful finding out I'd won. I had a full-blown panic attack. But afterwards, I actually got some emails from people and people sharing and stuff, and a couple of comments in a meeting that I'm a part of every month, and people going, oh my God, I've just put two and two together that was you. And it was really lovely, but it's not at all what I was expecting.
We'll play a voiceover version of the poem now. So Claire will record a voiceover version of the poem. We'll put a bit of backing music and we'll play it now.
I was bubbly, brilliant, intrinsically useful. I got A's without trying. I blew minds effortlessly. I cared not about anything. Permanency was lacking. When invited to dine with vice-chancellors, I declined. I was bubbly, brilliant, intrinsically useful. I gave two shits about what would become of me. Life was a constant precipice of fear and degradation. Goodbye to university, to scholarships, to life. 15 years waiting. Busy. Hello to university, to scholarships, to life. Returning much older, rounder, wiser, saggy, unnoticed. I no longer get guys cruising for a bruising by that girl. I no longer get help, eye contact, or special attention. I get pitied, ignored, blamed, shamed. I get called stupid, oh so stupid, an irredeemably deranged fighter. Irrelevant, vain, my outcome is set by the size of my arse and the pity. I am the awkward, silences, the frazzled staff. I am no longer a genius, a vice-chancellor's scholar, delightful and eccentric. No, now I live in a world where I am a commodity, an answer to inclusivity. A world where idiotic questions, such as what does diversity mean, are competitions. I am suddenly one of Stella Young's Hallmark moments. I am the warrior in an ersatz reality, signalling virtuosity and compassion. I am not real. I am plastic. 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 I am loudly pushing past expectations and limits, quantified only by the dice I hold in my hand and my mind. I am driven by the realisation of confinement, of being the other, the unnoticed, the forgotten, the middle-aged feminist in chains, has given me a quiet comfort, a glass prism, casting colours. I am colours, transfused with light, colours which are thicker than air. holier than water, better to breathe, walk, fly, dance to. Fragile me is long forgotten, perfect me is now. They are not ready for me, those who ask for answers to the unanswerable. Who reasons a competition, a learning module, a theme can erase a day, a decade, a mark or a due date. If I arise in 15 more years, will you be ready, or will I be in charge? But I am your zip in your due date, your crumpling ambition. I am the volume of trauma of myopic decisions. I am your accumulated lack of knowledge, your two shits given. I am your clown, your collaborator, your meek smiling sycophant. I am your vice, your passport to meet your quotas. I am your second, third or final choice, your two shits given. I am your masked avenger, your disability hire. I sing for my supper, compliant and bribed. I am the rude girl for whom you make excuses, wondering how I got a seat at your table. I am the staff members' pride, their abject horror. I am their best, worst, their wine subscription. I am their workload, their fancies floating ephemerally before sharp fiscal riposte. I was bubbly, brilliant, intrinsically youthful. I gave two shits about what would become of us. I won.
Is there anything else you want to say about the poem?
I didn't personally think it was that powerful. I've now started to change my opinion on it. It was just driven from rage because I don't know. I don't want to be one of those people, and I often am, where people will come up and go, "You're so inspiring. You're so like this or that." Like I gave a lecture a few years ago about what it was like to be a ward of the state. And that was a good experience, like talking to people and having people come up and go, well done on pursuing the tertiary education and stuff. But I guess I'd like to be in a world where I'm just normal. Like I'm not someone where they go, "Oh, wow." Or I've often got the comment of, oh, you're neurodiverse. I didn't really actually pick up on that. Like you must be only like slightly like, you're really well functioning. And it's like, you don't understand. Every time I've left a 50th birthday party or a 40th birthday party early, it's not because my tooth hurts. It's because I can't be around all these people. It's not, I don't avoid every social gathering or thing because I'm a snob. It's because I can't do it. Just because I don't like broadcast in neon on my head that, hello, neurodiverse, and this is exactly what's wrong with me. It doesn't mean that it's not there. One thing that angers me is what Stella Young called Hallmark moments. And I've had well-meaning people come up and say, well done. Oh, wow, like you've done so well with your degrees, or like how they've introduced me. I don't want to be introduced like that. I want to be introduced as, hey, this is Claire Kearns. This is like my student, my friend, my cousin, whatever the hell. Like not, this is the most inspiring person that ever happened. I don't want that. I just want I want an education and a chance at a life that's the same like chance that everybody else has. Maybe in another 10 years, I'll turn around and go, woohoo, yeah, I am awesome. But right now, I just want to be on an equal playing field.
So obviously it takes me a moment to gather my thoughts before I say anything too.
Some
people find that really off-putting. Yeah, they think I'm ignoring them, but actually no, I'm processing. And yeah. Oh, what was I going to say? I'm having a blank moment. What you're saying, when we put our heads over the parapet to talk about our experiences, it's not that we're looking for praise. That's not at all the point, is it? It's like there's something not right here. We need you to listen and to change.
Yes, that's it. I wasn't going to share my poem with anybody because, like, I thought it was going to look like humble brag posts and stuff. But I've now realised that I need to. You know, I still haven't told close friends some of the situations for me. So this is going to be a bit of an awkward share of a podcast. Like, but, you know, maybe some people will go, oh, so that makes sense. But the way I kind of see it is, would you walk into a room and go, hey, I've had prostate cancer, or, oh, I've got hemorrhoids, or, hey, I've got this awesome ingrown toenail. Like, why would I share my medical details? Why should I have to? Why isn't every situation set up in a way that is a little bit more inclusive, where there are chill out zones throughout campus? Or there's like a bursary fund that might help people like me actually get to campus. Like that'd be awesome. Like, I'd like to see the campus again. Like, just little inclusions that could just be woven into the fabric would be really good.
These roles that you have sort of representing neurodiverse students in various bodies through the university, do you feel like you're just there to tick the diversity box?
I do sometimes, much to their regret, sometimes. In all the time I've been doing it, though, the only thing that I've actually managed to do of a concrete nature is in the enrolment process, there's a teeny tiny checkbox that says, I cannot contact you, Equity Department. Please contact me. Because I went the first 2 years unable to contact Equity. No, I do think I am like the token inclusion and not the first person that they go to. And I've actually started deleting emails sometimes, giving myself permission to do that. And I still do it, even though it's the crappiest thing in the world to put myself out there. This week I've got something coming up with the executive committee. Somehow the topic of the LMS came up and I basically went, well, the LMS is like hostile to neurodiverse people. The whole system, like of how the websites work, hostile, the colours, hostile. Like, none of this works for us. And like the Zoom meeting we're on right now doesn't work for us. And they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean? I'm like, look, this is going to take too long to like describe. I'm going to send you a list. So I sent them off a list. And after the meeting, and they wrote back, wow, thank you so much. I never actually considered some of these. I'm actually going to incorporate it into not just meetings for this, but like meetings for everything. And I was like, you know what happens to us? And that's the empathy thing. Like, I even feel it when I interrupt you, like, because you know how it hurts, because what happens to me in meetings is there's a pause in my brain, which you may not be picking up on the fact that I pause, but this is a topic I'm passionate about. It's like, so when the pause happens, there's always an eager beaver in every tutorial that knows everything about international relations. And I'll be halfway through a sentence and someone will go, blah, 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 blah. And by the time, if someone goes, oh, Claire, what were you saying again? By then it's gone. I've no idea. One of my key things was that I said, you've got to understand that we might have a different speaking way, that pause, and you might literally be watching like, you know, tick, 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 tick happen. You've got to give us time, because coming back to us 2 minutes later, 5 minutes later, it ain't going to work. Our short-term memories, it's not going to work. What actually has to happen is the eager beaver needs to be gone one moment, let the other person finish. But I think our world is so successful people are lawyers and doctors or whatever, biomed students and stuff, and I've had to integrate with some of them. And that whole culture is scramble to the top, survival of the fittest, like the alpha will win. But that doesn't work for us. So we're never going to get to be more confident or socially less awkward if we can't speak.
Coming back to another thing that you raised when you initially proposed this, you talked about we're two people, even though we have a lot in common, we're coming from very different backgrounds in terms of our politics.
Yeah. So when I first met you and took your subject, I thought, okay, so this guy's probably like left-leaning or an environmentalist of some kind. And then where I was at that point, like I'd formed none of my own opinions, right? But because of coming from domestic violence, had basically had other people's opinions thrust on me. So I'd basically been like a National Party voter for like the last 20 years and totally opposite from you. And that was really awkward because it was like, well, I don't have any opinions of my own, but the ones that I've been spouting, a good little Stepford wife, has basically been something where I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be accepted. And so that made me even more, can I converse with this person and what can I converse about and how much can I converse? So, yeah, that was really weird. But it's actually an important lesson more outside of just like an individual relationship, is that two people can actually get along that have very, very different views. And I think it's really important at the moment. I think it's a necessary conversation to have. Like, I mean, you're probably more environmentalist, and I was like the sort of person that goes, lawn bowling and like sporting shooting. And I can't imagine you operating weaponry. No offense. That was very awkward, but also really good that it happened, because I think I would have gone insane in this environment if I hadn't have learnt that lesson that I don't have to have everything in common. There's no such thing as like a perfect relationship between people. I don't have to fear being socially awkward because I sit here fidgeting with my hair tied the whole time we're talking, where it might look like I'm not actually paying attention. But having a relationship where you don't have everything in common is powerful because of that reason, for like a neurodiverse person, because you realise perfection don't matter. I might fall through the door, whatever I'm doing, but I'll get there.
Just reflecting on that for me, like, because I've always felt a little different, like even when I'm in a team, I never really feel wholeheartedly part of a team. Like, I don't fully embrace everything about it. So I often find full-fledged commitment to any idea or to any in-group, it feels a bit cultish to me because I don't feel fully part of it just by nature of who I am. And I see that as an advantage at times like this, because you don't get sucked into cults. And we're surrounded by all kinds of cults on all sides of politics right now.
I think in some ways that we came from different sides of politics to start with, and different ideas was actually quite good. I've personally made a journey where we're probably much more aligned in our political and faith beliefs and social justice. I mean, my social justice was probably already over there, but I've definitely magically transformed a long way. But I think to start with, it was a benefit because it makes it easier to converse with someone sometimes that you don't have things in common with, because you can keep that person at a distance. Maybe that's something that neurotypical people could learn from us, that, maybe our social awkwardness is actually a benefit. What I would like to see out of this conversation is minimum of someone else thinking, it's not just me. Or even better, something changes, like that makes it easier for either us or some other people. But minimum someone just go, so I'm not the only person that thinks they're a doofus.
Thanks, Claire. This is cool.
Oh, no, that's okay.
The Edge Dwellers Cafe.
Inclusion is an ongoing practice, not a box to be ticked. In preparation for this podcast interview, when Claire and I were discussing what kind of backing soundtrack that we'd have underneath her recital of her award-winning poem, Claire suggested that a rolling thunderstorm would convey the rage that she felt while she was writing the poem. That rage is an emotion that all neurodiverse people feel at one time or another, as a product of the frustration of trying to navigate and exist within social structures that are inherently hostile. The genius of Claire's writing and advocacy work is her ability to communicate that anger and frustration with power in a way that can't be ignored. A reminder that if you'd like to support the Edge Dwellers Cafe podcast, please click on the like and subscribe buttons and leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. You know how the algorithms work. Help bring more listeners into the Edge Dwellers Cafe. You can support the podcast materially with a one-off PayPal contribution. This financial support helps to cover the costs of hosting, production, editing and research for the podcast, and it's very much appreciated. The Edge Dwellers Cafe Patreon page continues to be offline for a while under renovation, but do stay tuned for updates about new offerings for Patreon subscribers when that's up and running again. Thanks as always for joining me. I'm taking a break over January for summer rest and recharge, but I'll be back again in February with all new conversations around politics, environment and mental health. This is Ben Habib signing off from the Edge Dwellers Cafe. All the best for the holiday season, stay safe and much love.